Welcome to Miami Reporters Roundtable Podcast. I'm your host, Peter Zalewski of Condo Vultures. If you're tuning in this podcast, you're going to hear a conversation by current and former journalists talking about some of the biggest stories that have occurred within the last week or so down here in the South Florida Tri-County area. What are we going to talk about this week? Well, story number one, 9 cities in Florida have been ranked amongst the most overvalued in the entire United States. We're also going to talk about Miami City Hall, if anybody's ever seen it. It's the old Pan American terminal where the seaplanes used to take off and land. Now they're talking about maybe turning it into condominiums, if you can believe that. Another story we're going to be dealing with, we got a luxury condo developer in West Palm Beach. He's looking at building a brand new tower, a little bit cheaper price, but it's supposed to be the same quality. It'll be fronting Clear Lake, and it's also going to be looking at Interstate 95 and the Everglades to the west. Another story we're going to get into, rental prices. What's going on with rental prices? Well, according to a new study, they're on their way down. Miami ranks as one of those markets where rental rates are falling the most. We're also going to get into a law that was passed, put into place in the state of Florida, which effectively bans investors from overseas, including from China and Venezuela, from being able to purchase property. We'll talk to the reporter who wrote that piece. And then finally, we're going to wrap up the podcast with a move by a receiver to take over a condo association that hasn't been doing what's necessary in order to meet the 2025 Condo Association financial cliff. And ultimately, they've lost control of it. We're going to talk about what's involved with that. So on the other side of the break, we're going to go ahead and get into our podcast.
Welcome to the CondoVultures.com podcast with your host, Peter Zalewski, a Miami real estate broker, Wall Street consultant, and expert witness. This podcast is focused on identifying real estate buying opportunities in the South Florida condo market of Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties. The CondoVultures.com podcast is not authorized by the South Florida real estate industry and will most likely annoy many of the region's talking heads. This podcast will feature straight talk and salty language that could be offensive to some. Please remember that past investment success does not determine future gains, especially in South Florida's volatile condo market. For more information, please visit CondoVultures.com.
This is Peter Zalewski of the Condo Vultures Podcast. Before I started doing these podcasts, I've been in the business of being a licensed real estate broker, a contributing columnist for the Miami Herald, as well as the Miami Real Deal, but also extra witness work in consulting. So if you are looking for an expert witness, or if you're looking for consulting services, a straight talk perspective as to what's going on in a particular marketplace, a building, or what happened previously, for whatever your situation is, whether you are an attorney, whether you are an institutional fund looking to invest, or whether you're a lender who's trying to come up with some sort of a strategy and approach for your lending committee going forward, I just might be able to help you. To get a hold of me, please reach out to Peter at CondoVultures.com. That's Peter at CondoVultures.com, or give me a call to the office at 305-865-5859, 305-865-5859. This is Peter Zalewski of the Condo Vultures Podcast. I hope you're enjoying the podcast. And I wanted to alert you that if you have a property that you're looking to sell in the Tri-County, South Florida area, I would encourage you to reach out to Jenny Cortez, a licensed real estate broker with CVRRealty.com. She's my partner. She's been in the business for north of 15 years. More importantly, she knows the market. She knows how to get a deal done. And she also realizes that it's more important to get a price that you can accept and sell the property rather than to hold firm on some price that's never going to be achieved and ultimately languish on the market. So if you're looking to do a deal that you want a skilled expert who can help you sell a property, reach out to Jenny Cortez at 305-865-5859, 305-865-5859, or visit her website, cvrrealty.com. Welcome to Miami Reporters Roundtable Podcast. I'm your host, Peter Zalewski. If you're tuning in this podcast, you're going to hear a conversation by current and former journalists talking about some of the biggest stories that occurred within the last week or so. The objective of the podcast is to cut through the fluff and give you, the audience, straight talks as to what really might be going on in this market. Why do we do this podcast? Well, real estate is based on hyperbole down here in South Florida, and there's just a little bit too much of it. And we want to try to convey to you, the audience, what really might be going on. Why do we have journalists doing it? Well, they don't necessarily have an allegiance. So that is the objective. That is the goal. What we will do for this podcast, we're going to discuss 6 stories that I handpicked. I send them off to the journalists, ask them to give them a read. And then I'm going to ask them to provide some comments. I will read the headline. I'll read the first couple graphs, and then the journalists are going to go around and have a discussion. So that being said, let me go ahead and introduce the podcast members this particular week. One of our regulars, this gentleman was a journalist for over 25 years, worked at a variety of different publications, including the Tampa Tribune. Right now, he has his own public relations and marketing firm called Gruss Communications. No one else but Jean Gruss. I would encourage you to check out his website, GrussPR.com, GRUSSPR.com. John, how's it going? How are you?
Great. I'm happy to be back in Miami after a week in the Conch Republic.
John, last week when we recorded episode number 9, and this is episode number 10, we recorded
Yes.
our podcast last week. You were getting ready for some sort of extracurricular activity that involved exercise. You want to share with the
Exercise.
audience what exactly you were up to, and more importantly, why?
Yeah, I ran in a race called the Keys 100. It's an ultra marathon. I did the 50-mile relay with a couple buddies, and we finished in triple digit temperatures, but we had a great time.
I failed to mention, John, if anybody wants to get a hold of you on Twitter, formerly Twitter, now X, they can get you at John Gruss, JeanGruss. Let's go on to another member of our podcast. This gentleman was a journalist for over 20 years, including working at the South Florida Business Journal, where he covered white-collar crime. He did business stories. Right now, he does public relations and marketing. No one else but John Fackler. You want to get a hold of John on X, which is formerly Twitter, get him at JT Fackler, JTFAKLER. Mr. Fackler, next year, what do you think? You're going to go down to the Keys with Mr. Gruss and participate in this event?
Well, not in this 110-degree weather. I think I would fall over just walking. Forget about running. So,
All right. Well, you got a year to train, Mr. Fackler, just in case. Something to consider. All right. And who's our visiting journalist this week? And she's making her maiden voyage on the Miami Reporters Roundtable Podcast. She's been a journalist close to 40 years. She spent 35 years at the Palm Beach Post, where she writes about real estate, law, economic development, and other business stories. Prior to that, she worked at the South Florida Business Journal. She also was an intern for the Washington Post, and she did time at a publication and refers to me, Alexandra, the Investment Dealers Digest. Is that correct?
IDD, Investment Dealers Digest. Yeah.
IDD, and that's Alexandra Clough. And if anybody wants to reach out to her, they can get her on X, which is formerly Twitter. Get her at A Clough PVP. And let me spell that ACLOUGH PVP, which stands for Palm Beach Post. Did I get that right, Alexandra?
Yes, you did. Great job on that. Thank you.
Thank you for coming on to the podcast. Welcome to your maiden voyage.
Well-
We have a loyal following. We've been doing this podcast for 5 years. And some of our followers really sort of they feel like they have an understanding of, who some of the personalities are on the podcast. Any chance you might be able to give us a little, elevator spiel just about your experience and how you got to South Florida if you were not born and raised?
Well, sure. Well, first of all, John, I actually was in the Keys as well this weekend. And I was at a beautiful wedding in Key Largo at Ocean Reef. Fortunately, the ceremony was outside. So there was a moment when the groom might have been a little overcome by heat, but everything worked out okay. And it was a very nice time. But I was born in Lake Worth at a hospital that no longer exists, Lake Worth General. I raised in Miami, in Kendall. Went to college up at my beloved American University in Washington, and managed to get a job there after I graduated. And then I decided to marry my longtime boyfriend, and we've also been married 35 years this year. Married as long as I've been at the Palm Beach Post. So
Congratulations. Well done. Well
I
done.
don't make a lot of changes when things are going okay. I think that's kind of the bottom line.
Love to hear that. Now you read about real estate. You also do, at least according to your bio, you do law, you do economic
Right.
development. What's the most interesting story maybe you've written about, or the one that's gotten the most clicks, if you will, in the last year or two? Any bizarre Florida man type of story or anything like that you didn't see coming?
It's always I've had lots of Florida man stories. I would say the one that got probably the most attention the past year was I did break the story that the plans to build the University of Florida campus in West Palm Beach had fallen apart, and that was
I saw that.
deal. Had been in the works for a couple of years to turn downtown West Palm Beach land into a graduate campus for the University of Florida, which very much wants to be in South Florida and tap not only the graduate students, but also the money here from generous philanthropists. UF doesn't have a lot of billionaires. They do have millionaires, but they don't have a lot of billionaire graduates. So that was a big deal for the university and for Palm Beach County, South Florida, and the state as well. Unfortunately, the deal ran into some rocky rocky waters when there was a dispute about exactly how that campus would be named, details of who would build what, and ultimately the new UF president, Ben Sass, came in and just pretty much iced the deal, and it died away. So there are now plans to bring another university to West Palm Beach, by the way. That would be Vanderbilt University.
Oh, wow.
From Nashville. And they are a private university. And they also are looking at all the growth here in South Florida, and they would like to be here too. So that is a new plan in the works. And I've been writing about that, and actually recently interviewed the chancellor who talked about their great ambitions to create another toehold in the Southeast, in another large, fast-growing southern state. It's a lot going on here in once sleepy Palm Beach County.
Yeah, once sleepy, past tense,
Right.
Palm Beach County. Interesting. Well, welcome aboard, Alexandra. Hopefully you have a great time. We're going to have some fun. We're going to kick it around, and I know the audience is really going to appreciate that. So let me deal with some housekeeping issues before we go ahead and begin our podcast. Point number one, if anybody has any questions for us, you have any comments, please feel free to reach out to us on X, which is formerly Twitter. Get us at Miami RRP, which stands for Miami Reporters Roundtable Podcast. It is not AARP. It is Miami RRP, Miami Reporters Roundtable Podcast. And then in terms of sponsorship of the podcast, it's actually my firm, condovultures.com. Any kind of statistics you're looking for, any kind of analysis, expert witness, consulting, even buy-side brokerages, services in some circumstances are available. So if you're looking for a condo, you're looking for information, you want straight talk, please check out the website, condovultures.com. So final tidbit before we go ahead and begin our podcast. We were named last week as the 6th best investing podcast in the state of Florida by an organization called feedspot.com. They went through, they tabulated however they did it. We did not know them. We did not pay. Basically, they collect a bunch of information and they make it easy for people who are looking for a particular subject matter to go ahead and find it. Kind of like if you look at Google News or Apple News or something like that. So they ranked us number 6. So just want to share that and thank everybody who's been on the podcast, because we've been grinding now through 5 seasons. Obviously, some people are paying attention. So I'd encourage you to subscribe to the website. I'd also encourage you to like the podcast. So that being said, let's go ahead and get into our stories. We're going to start off with John Bruce with story number 1. Mr. Bruce, this is a piece that's coming out of the Miami Herald. I'll read you the headline, first couple graphs, and I want you to comment. And here we go with the headline. Headline, Florida has 9 of the most overpriced housing markets. Here's where and by how much. And let's go on with the first couple graphs. 9 Florida housing markets, including Miami, are among the most overpriced in the U.S. Data from 2 universities show. The 9 Florida markets were all listed as overvalued by double digits. Of the biggest 100 U.S. metro housing markets considered overvalued, the Miami metro area ranked at 11th with a 34.7% overvalue ranking, if you will. Cape Coral on the state's Gulf Coast was listed as the most overpriced Florida area, ranked 3rd at 38.9%. Of the Florida cities on the top 100 list, Tampa came in number 4. Palm Bay, number 7, Lakeland, number 8, Orlando, 9, Northport, 12, Deltona, 13, and Jacksonville in at 25th. And if anybody's wondering what were the top 3 or top 2 overrated housing markets in the United States, Atlanta's coming in number 1 at 41%, and Detroit, of all places, which was suffering the Great Recession, they're actually number 2 at 40%, and then Cape Coral was number 3. Mr. Bruce, you spend a lot of time reporting and being an editor over on the Gulf Coast of Florida. You know many of these locations. Can you sort of talk about, did anything surprise you from this particular story? And can you also factor in the hurricane that hit on the Gulf Coast of Florida a couple years back, which basically devastated a lot of existing construction and triggered a whole investment boom, if you will, from speculators who are trying to come in, buy cheap, put up something and then turn around and retrade it. So why don't you give us your take, Mr. Bruce?
Oh, I wrote that story in 2005. I mean, it's boom and bust. Florida's boom and bust. I mean, we all went, if you were here back in 2004, 2005, all those stories were almost identical. It's almost like you're having a flashback. I mean, this is just the story of Florida. This is the kind of frenzy that happens, every 10, 20 years, and we all write about it. And then, housing is unaffordable, and then all of a sudden it's affordable again. I just feel like it's, we are going through the same cycle again. And, yeah, this is just, the nature of Florida real estate, it seems.
And Mr. Cruz, Cape Coral. What is it
Yeah.
about Cape Coral? Why is it always like, if you remember the movie,
Yeah.
The Big Short,
Right.
Right.
I mean, there was a whole segment
So-
dedicated to how these fund managers came in and they went to the in and around Cape Coral. They did a variety of other things, and I encourage everybody to check out the movie. And ultimately, that's where a lot of the investment took place. And once again, Cape Coral is on this list. What is it about Cape Coral, Mr. Cruz? Is it the
Well-
vacant land, or why don't you give us your take?
Yes, actually, Cape Coral is the largest city in the state of Florida by land area.
Really?
Yes, it is. And, it was a land scam when it was started. Basically, people bought these lots sight unseen and had no utilities. Back in the 50s and 60s, and it was you were purchasing your quarter-acre lot in paradise, and they sold them. Basically chopped up a bunch of swampland, dug a bunch of canals, and dredged a bunch of canals, and created this place in the middle of nowhere. And it's always been, speculative frenzy in Cape Coral. It's just, it's somebody's compared it to like, the moon. It's like being on the moon. You drive and drive and drive, and there's really nothing there. I mean, it's just sort of grown by default. And there's been a lot of speculation and buying and selling of lots. And, it's just a weird place. You got to go visit it. But it's been the site of like incredible speculative frenzy. There was, quarter-acre lots were going for $50,000 back in 2005, and you couldn't get rid of them. During the downturn, they were going for a couple $1,000 a piece. And then now again, the speculative frenzy's taken off again. And it's the ultimate boom and bust story of Florida.
Hey, Alexandra, if I can ask you a question, you've been at the Palm Beach Post for 35 years, so you were here during the Great Recession. You got to experience some of that. You've seen the real estate cycles change. So I guess I have two questions for you. Question number one, are you surprised that West Palm Beach is not on this list as being overvalued, given the rapid appreciation that we've seen there? And then question number two, is it different this time? Because every time we talk about valuation being so high, we hear that, well, prices never come down. They just keep going up. People don't say that trees are going to grow to the moon, but I'm just wondering if you can give us some perspective.
All good points. I think there's a big difference between West Coast Florida and Southeast Florida in this cycle, different from prior cycles. And I think the biggest difference is the volume of companies that have moved here, including in particular Palm Beach County. During the pandemic, people, from the Northeast or large cities moved to Florida to get away from crowded urban places where they had to take public transportation to work. They wanted to be in a place where they could be outside, so not cold. And we saw that migration of companies moving here or the migration of people working remotely. The difference here is that a lot of companies began expanding and opening satellite offices or small offices in South Florida, and in particular in Palm Beach County. And with that opening of offices here and there, financial firms, which had been taking place slowly over the past, I'd say 15 years, you really saw an acceleration of that. And you add to that the fact that people like to cluster near other people and other companies that they know. So you started to get some momentum. I don't know necessarily that we saw that same clustering or momentum happening in Cape Coral. I know that people, when they move to Florida from places in New York or Chicago, they want a few things. Number one, they want to have a house on the water, and they want to be able to put their boat behind their house. They also want to know where they can play golf. And maybe for a while they were able to do that, and they wanted to do that in Cape Coral. But maybe also, some of their employers are saying you got to come back to the office now. And if your office didn't move to Cape Coral or someplace nearby, then that means you have to, go back to where you are and you can no longer work completely remotely. So while we know hybrid work may be here to stay, I do also know that a lot of companies, including my employer, the Palm Beach Post, do want to see you in the office a couple days a week. So I think that is what has been the key difference in keeping West Palm Beach and South Florida a little bit immune from being on a list like this, because you still, in fact, I'm working on a story for this week about more finance investment firms, even a new healthcare provider that are going to be opening offices in West Palm Beach. And I think that momentum, while it's slowed significantly since the pandemic, it is still continuing.
Interesting perspective. Let's go on with story number 2. Mr. Fackler, John Fackler, we're going to go to you with story number 2. This is a piece coming out of Miami today. I'll read you the headline and the first couple graphs, and I want you to comment. And just a little bit of background before I go ahead and begin with the story. Pan American Airways used to fly seaplanes out of Miami into places in the Caribbean as well as Latin America. Lo and behold, airports were built in Latin America, at least according to the story. And it all progressed and evolved. Airport was built in Miami, and lo and behold, it was no longer necessary to go ahead and fly through a seaplane. City of Miami bought the old terminal, which is right on the water in Coconut Grove, a ritzy part of Miami, and has been using it as City Hall and administrative building for a number of years, basically since the 50s. Now a brand new City Hall is being built, and there's some discussion, what do you do with this particular location, which is Art Deco design and some would say historically significant. So that's the background, Mr. Fackler. Let me go ahead and read you the headline for a couple graphs, and I want you to comment. Here we go with the headline. Is City Hall's destiny condo towers or a municipal treasure? And here we go. Our report last week on city offices coming to the old Melreese Golf Course posed a warning for anyone who cherishes heritage. How long can historic Miami City Hall survive? It flies under the radar, but the gleaming building by cutting-edge architectonica will replace not just its predecessor on the Miami River, but also City Hall, which for 50 years has been on the National Register of Historic Places. The city has already dealt away its riverfront administration building to developer Adler, which is building this for the city on Melreese. Once the new offices open, how long will it take to try to sell off the historic City Hall on Dinner Key 2? The argument will be that the city has no use for the building and its land that was once the Pan American World Airways seaplane gateway to Latin America and the Caribbean. Elected officials will point to the current needs and say a sale to the developer can fill holes in the budget. Story goes on to say that a decision is going to have to be made soon because City Hall will be moving. Mr. Fackler, why don't you give us some take on City Hall? You've been there. I don't know if you've ever attended or spoken before the city commission. You know where it is. Maybe you went through the local watering hole right next door. Why don't you give us your take? And then also, too, can you talk about the heritage in Miami, the history? As somebody who's been here since the 1980s, what say you, Mr. Beckler?
Yeah, I really found this story interesting. I'm a history buff. And the reason I'm a history buff is the hometown I'm from in Long Island, New York, was known as a bastion for British spies during the Revolutionary War. There was even a Netflix series about it. I forgot the name of it now. But
was that Turncoats?
Yeah, something like that. That. But look, Miami is only 125 years old. And why not keep this history that's storied? It's 50 years it's been on the National Register of Historic Places. Why sell it to a developer just to fill some funding gaps and build condos? It just doesn't make any sense. Now, Miami Today, the publication, Peter used to work there, right?
Yeah. I did some time there.
They've proposed a public facilities trust so that the city's assets won't disappear forever because they shut this thing down. It's never going to come back. The building itself, you mentioned earlier, it was fascinating. If anybody goes in there, it's Art Deco, but there are like frescoes on the ceiling of, going through the aviation history, starting with Leonardo da Vinci, his first plane and, the whole Pan Am situation. So it's really fascinating, very interesting to go and see that. And the proposal is to make this designation a museum, as well as the parkland surrounding it to make it as a destination. Now, why not? It seems like a brilliant idea to do that. I mean, there's always going to be ways to stopgap the funding issues that are there. But why, are you going to do it because the developer is going to come in and pay you money? I mean, I just think it's a shame. We talked about this before about gentrification efforts in Miami going sideways. I mean, Wynwood is a good example. Our community decided to go tourist, decided to go new developments that don't even look artistic. We talked about investors in Little Havana, turning some of the clubs into like Americana places instead of Cuban historic designations. I just feel like there's not a lot of effort, attention being paid to keeping the flavor of Miami and the historic areas, the historic designations. And I really think it would be a shame for this to happen downtown. I mean, on Dinner Key. By the way, quick interesting factoid. I didn't know this either. Coconut Grove was actually it remained a separate government from Miami until the 1930s, like a separate
20s.
city the whole time. Yeah. So
20s.
Oh, twice, really? Okay.
Yeah. Interesting. Alexandra, if I could go to you, you work over at the Palm Beach Post. You living up in West Palm Beach area, if you will, but you were actually in the Miami area. Do you have any thoughts about what's currently a City Hall, but the previously Pan American terminal, and B, any thoughts on maybe what should be done with this facility, which it really is, it's breathtaking.
Well, I was just thinking, as John was speaking, that, the nature of Miami is that there is no history. I mean, Miami is one of those cities where, I just remember when David Paul came here with Centrust, and suddenly, nobody knows who this guy is. I'm referring to the former bank CEO who was a participant in the junk bond scandal of the 1980s and subsequently went to prison. But unlike other cities that have a history where someone and respect and care about that history, and people who are outsiders who come in have kind of a hard time breaking in, that's not Miami. Miami is you come in, there you are, you meet a few people, you're just part of whatever group happens to be happening. And so, I think it's sad. And one of the things that I've written a lot about at the Palm Beach Post is the loss of these old Florida landmarks, which is really what that is. It's sort of people seeking or remembering a time that was important to them. I wrote about the Palm Beach Raceway, for instance, which closed, and the owners wanted to turn it into a distribution facility, and residents who had raced there for decades fought it, and now it's kind of in limbo right now. But yeah, it's a shame. Pan American is an iconic brand and a key part of Miami and its history and its growth. But I just feel like maybe Miami isn't necessarily one of those, cities, maybe because of its youth, of its relative youth itself. Like you said, 125 years. It just doesn't seem to have the commitment necessarily that maybe you might find in cities in the Northeast or other parts of the country.
Interesting comments. Mr. Bruce, any comments about City Hall?
Yeah, it's a prime piece of real estate. It is just right there in the Grove, on the water, between yacht clubs. It is just a beautiful piece of property. And it always seemed to me that having a government building there was kind of jarring, and really not the best use of real estate. And the city does have pressing needs. It does have pressing financial needs. And I'm not quite sure that the city should be in I don't think a government offices is really the appropriate use for that piece of property. And I'm all for them selling it. Now, what replaces it? I'm not sure. And, Architectonica, has sort of defined the skyline here. And, in sort of, uh, in ways that perhaps are not as tasteful. But anyway, I think it's just not the highest and best use for that beautiful piece of property.
And I should say, during World War One, it was actually part of a naval base for the
Yes.
United States, and then ultimately Pan Am got its hands on it, and you saw the whole evolution of flight, if you will, in the world. So let's go on to story number 3. Story number 3, Alexandra Clough. We're going to go to you. This is a piece you wrote. It appeared in the Palm Beach Post. I read the headline for a couple graphs. Then I'll ask you to provide some insight. You might be writing about the story again or about the issue again, so you don't necessarily have to comment. But you can just share any insight you have with the audience. Here we go. Again, Palm Beach Post headline: the Bristol was the priciest. The Berkeley, a new West Palm Beach condo, will be close behind. And here we go with the first couple graphs. Developer of the Bristol condominium plans to build another condo in West Palm Beach that will be a scaled down version of the priciest and most luxurious condo ever built in Palm Beach County. The new tower, dubbed the Berkeley, will rise 25 stories and be built on Clear Lake, the body of water on the city's western boundary that also serves as the city's drinking water supply. It's going to be the Bristol quality, but we're going to do it for a lesser price, according to Alan Adelson, who co-developed the Bristol in 2019. But because it's me, I'm going to give them the Bristol look, feel, and quality. It'll be Bristol-esque for sure. Alexandra, as a layman or somebody visiting West Palm Beach, they're going to know Clear Lake because if they're taking Interstate 95, and when they get off to go east on Okeechobee and they start to head towards downtown West Palm Beach before ultimately if they're going to Palm Beach Island, where Mar-a-Lago is and other things, they would have saw on the left-hand side as they're going east, or the north side, they would have saw this Clear Lake, and they saw some condominiums that were built there before. The Bristol in this particular location, does it make a lot of sense? Are they trying to reposition that area, given the fact that you have train tracks right there? You have the Bright Line, which is the private commuter train that's now going to Orlando, as well as the Tri-Rail, or what's exactly the thought process of this particular location?
Well, like I said a few minutes ago, people moving down here, they want to be on the water, and the waterfront in downtown West Palm Beach on the east side is bounded by the Intracoastal Waterway. So you have West Palm Beach, and then the Intracoastal, and then Palm Beach, and then the Atlantic Ocean. Flagler Drive runs along the Intracoastal, and it's pretty much spoken for by real estate developers. We've been writing for the past few years about not just the Bristol, but other condominiums that are built or planned for Flagler Drive, both south of the bridges. There's 3 bridges from West Palm Beach to Palm Beach, and all along there, all the land is taken by somebody else. Therefore, what Alan Adelson and his investors want to do is build on West Palm Beach's other waterfront, the western side of the downtown, and that is Clear Lake, which is, as I said in the story, part of the city's drinking water supply. Unlike other cities, West Palm Beach gets its water from surface sources. It does not get it from underground sources, although my colleague Kimberly Miller recently wrote that the city of West Palm Beach is looking to drill some underground wells, and then recently asked permission of the South Florida Water Management District because the city needs more water, frankly. Anyway, so plans are for this condominium to try to create a new neighborhood because West Palm Beach is pretty much out of dirt to build things with a water view that aren't crowded by all the other towers that are being built. So developers are starting to look, yes, on the west side, and these 2 parcels were assembled in the past couple of years, and now they're looking to try to build a condominium that is has larger units and would be geared toward people who are moving here, to some of the financial companies, tech firms, fintech firms that have moved to West Palm Beach, can't afford a $10 million condominium at the Bristol, or maybe a $6 or $7 million condominium in some of the units on Flagler Drive, but might want to be considering something in the $1.7 to $3 million range. These would be large units, about 3,500 square feet, suitable for like 4 or even 5 bedrooms. So the goal, according to the developer, is to focus on people who may have families and want to be, then they work downtown. They want to have enough space for the kid, maybe a playroom. The other benefit of this location is, being from Miami, even, growing up in the 60s and then learning to, start driving in the, late 70s and early 80s. I mean, the traffic was horrible even back then. I did an internship one time at the Miami News, and I mean, let's face it, it was terrible then. It's like a million times worse now. And some of that is happening in West Palm Beach too. So the downtown gridlock, even to get from 95 to Palm Beach, is really incredible sometimes. Therefore, this development, which is kind of on the western edge of the downtown, evades the downtown gridlock. So you can kind of get off 95, get to this place, hop on 95, and not really get stuck in traffic. So that's what the developer hopes for, at least, might be the appeal of it.
And Alexandra, one follow-up question. There used to be something called City Place, which was a open air mixed use type of development with a cinema up at the top as the anchor, and then there was a bunch of retail. They had restaurants, Cheesecake Factory, all that type of stuff. It then became known, I think it was Rosemary Square, and then it was known as the Square, and now it's reverting back to City Place. But basically, it's a ghost town. So I guess what I'm wondering is this trying to time or get ahead of the market? So as redevelopment occurs on what used to be called City Place and now has been renamed City Place, is there some kind of massive development there that maybe the developer's trying to peg it to? Or is this simply, this is the only dirt they could get that's waterfront? They figure they'd go forward and try to modify their development to meet the needs of the market.
Yeah, I don't think it has anything to do with City Place, which is not as much of a ghost town as it used to be, actually. I mean,
Okay.
recently, actually, in the past few years, and, we have written many stories on this, have really tried to reshape it from a kind of an outdoor shopping center into, frankly, mostly an office and residential complex. Because with the advent of the internet, Amazon, and also the Palm Beach outlets on Palm Beach Lakes Boulevard, retail shopping, as we all know, has really taken a hit. So they recast that whole project into high rise, and they want to build more high rises. They just opened the former Macy's department store is now a brand new apartment complex called the Laurel, which is starting at $3,400 a month, which is about $1,000 more than any other rental apartment.
Whoa.
And, you have the Bright Line, which, as we know, just recently raised fares. So I'm not really sure what effect that's going to have on anything. However, this new project is also near where they're talking about building the Vanderbilt University graduate campus. So if that actually does take place, that would be a huge boost for that section of the city. And you would have, it would potentially attract more companies, certainly professors. I don't know if professors can afford 1.7, but maybe if they're very good, they would be able to. But it would be a huge economic boost for West Palm Beach and probably Palm Beach County.
Wow. Fascinating story. Let's go on with story number 4. John Grist, we're going to go to you with story number 4. This piece coming on the Business Insider. I'm going to read you the headline, first couple graphs, and I want you to comment. Headline: This U.S. region is seeing the biggest rent declines as owners struggle to fill vacancies, Redfin says. And there's 3 bullet points before I go ahead and read the first couple graphs. Bullet point number 1, metros in the Sun Belt are notching the steepest rent declines in the country, Redfin reported. Point number 2, the pandemic-era demand that led to accelerated construction has since subsided, leading to more vacancies. And point number 3, these declines are happening as rents rise nationwide. And here we go, Mr. Grist, first couple graphs. The country's steepest rent declines are happening in the metro areas across the Sun Belt as pandemic-era demand spikes subside, Redfin reported. Leading the national trend is Austin, Texas, where rents fell 6.6% on an annual basis last month. Runner-ups include Nashville, Tennessee, Jacksonville, Florida, Miami, and San Diego. And here's a quote from a senior economist over at Redfin. The quote is, the Sun Belt has built a ton of new apartments in recent years, partly to meet the surge in demand brought on by the flood of people who moved in during the pandemic-era housing boom. But the boom is over, and now property owners are struggling to fill vacancies, which is causing rents to fall. Mr. Groove, why do you think of Victory Lap? You've been talking about how many new rental towers were being built in and around South Florida. I think last time we discussed it, 40,000 or so were currently under construction in the Tri-County, South Florida area. Redfin's now reporting nationwide we're seeing a big pullback in rents. Where does it go from here, Mr. Groove?
Yeah, I mean, we started talking about this in season 4. I mean, because you could see it coming. I mean, you could see the numbers of apartment units under construction and in the pipeline, and the number of people who were relocating to South Florida was slowing, and it was just a supply and demand imbalance, and the result is that rents are falling and are going to continue to fall as more apartments come online and supply outstrips demand. So it was we had sort of foreseen that last year, just looking at the numbers. So I think going forward now, the problem is that a lot of developers who have started on these projects, I mean, you can't just start this project and a project like this and stop in the middle of it. Although I have read about some developers who have sort of shifted their plans for new apartments. They've shifted to the condo model, but you can't just turn it off halfway through a project. So it's going to be really interesting. And I think anecdotally, you and I have both been hitting the streets and seeing for rent signs pop up everywhere. I know in some of the buildings that I used to live in Brickell, for example, I mean, there are a lot of vacancies, a lot of vacant apartments. I've seen some discounts on rents, nothing too significant yet, but I think it's just a matter of time.
And before I open it to the floor, let me just throw out the fact, in the article, it says, according to CBRE's commercial real estate entity, it says, based on their 2024 market outlook, there's about 440,000 rentals under construction in the United States. And if you remember back to an episode or two ago that we did, there were over 40,000 under construction in the Tri-County, South Florida area. So if I just do some rough math, then basically 10% of all the new rentals under construction or in the pipeline are occurring right here in the Tri-County area. So, Mr. Fackler, why don't I ask you, and then Alexandra, if you want to offer anything. Mr. Fackler, you were adamant for quite some time about how rents were strong, and we were the gateway to Latin America, and all the work from home people were here from New York and California. Last week, he's tended to pull back a little bit. There was a little bit of a shuffle, a little bit of a flip-flop going on. Are you starting to become a believer, or do you still think that so many people are coming to South Florida, we're going to be able to fill up all of these rental units in addition to all the condos that were purchased to be rented out? What say you, Mr. Fackler?
I'm a believer. I'm following Jean's lead.
What is Jean? Why Jean? What about me?
Well, I'm telling you, listen. I've always said it was overbuilt. I always said that eventually it's going to be supply and demand. I said there'll be a pushback because people, are very egotistical here in South Florida. They want to get the best price they possibly can. They're going to hold out for as long as they possibly can. So I just think it's more of a timing thing. I think it's going to take a little bit longer for things to, work through the market.
Alexandra, if I can ask you to crack the code for us, as somebody who is effectively a unicorn, born and raised in South Florida, the question is, if the population decreases, how do the rental prices go up if there's more supply? This is something we've been kicking around. For some reason, it seems like in South Florida, as there's less demand, the landlords want more money in rents. It kind of goes against everything you learn in economics 101. But have you ever been able to figure that out during your, your time here in South Florida?
Yes, and I figured it out, and therefore I'm just going to retire on this based on this knowledge. And no, I mean, I think you have to look at the land costs and the financing costs. I mean, land is expensive, and if developers got to develop. That's what they're born to do, I guess. So they're going to keep doing it regardless necessarily of whether market conditions always call for it. They've got investors; they have to deploy it, and whether it's national companies, institutional investors. foreign investors, you name it. They see something hot, they want to be there too. But yes, the land costs are expensive. Now we see with interest rates, over the past year, money is expensive. So their basis is high. So how low can they really go on these apartments? I know that they've drifted down. Rents have drifted down in West Palm Beach as well. And I also know that some owners are starting to shop sites that were planned for apartment complexes that they're not going to go forward. But, as your panelists said, if something's already in the works, you can't stop it. You've got to finish it. Got to finish it and then hope you can flip it to, I don't want to say the dumb money, but, that may be coming into play as well here. And then that's when you'll really start to see, I don't know if it would be a collapse, but a shift in the apartment market. As we've seen over the decades with other commercial properties, shopping centers, office buildings, someone's going to be left holding it. And if there's too many and the demand's not there, we are going to see, a softening of that market.
Stay tuned. We might see a softening of the market. I'm sure a lot of people out there watching and listening to the podcast are going to be very interested to see how this thing plays out. Story number 5, Alexandra Clough, we're going to go to you. This is a story you wrote and appeared in the Palm Beach Post. And I'll read you the headline. I'll read you the subhead and first couple graphs. And any insight you can provide would be fantastic. Here we go with the headline. Florida law barring Chinese nationals from buying homes challenged in federal lawsuit. Subhead, branded as national security law, critics of Florida's SB 264 say it discriminates against would-be homeowners based on their national origin. And here we go with the first couple graphs. A band of housing advocates are taking aim at Florida law that prohibits most Chinese individuals without a green card from purchasing property in the state. The law, which took effect in July, also restricts property purchases by Russian, Iranian, North Korean, Cuban, Venezuelan, and Syrian nationals. Governor Ron DeSantis praised the legislation, a way to keep members of the Chinese Communist Party and other foreign agents from worming their way into American society. But critics say it only fueled illegal housing discrimination. A realtor, 3 advocacy groups, one of which is based in Lake Worth Beach, and an Asian American Realty Association asked a federal judge in Miami this month to bar officials across the state from enforcing the law. Wow. We discussed this last season when it was sort of getting going. What can you tell us about this?
I have to point out that story was written and frankly mostly written by my esteemed colleague, Hannah Phillips, who covers courts for the Palm Beach Post. But yeah, I would say that the plaintiffs in this case who are seeking to get a federal judge to block enforcement of this new law, that they would argue that this is kind of a solution in search of a problem. And, do we have a lot of North Koreans wanting to buy property in South Florida? Probably not. But does it feed into, concerns about dangerous foreigners who may be planting their presence here in Florida? Yes, it does. And, a little bit, I think, could have been driven possibly by what's been taking place in California when there were, I think, about 55,000 acres that were purchased by an investment company that nobody knew who they were, but they bought all this land around an Air Force base. So there was concern that Chinese nationals or Chinese Communist Party or somebody, with other intentions was seeking to amass property near important military bases. And that was sort of the aim of this law by the Florida legislature and Governor DeSantis. I don't know how much of a danger that's been in generally in Florida, whether there have been any established concerns about, enemies of the country, of the United States, purchasing property near sensitive military facilities. I mean, here in Palm Beach County, we don't have military facilities. So when I spoke to real estate agents, they did not report that they had encountered any problems with that because most of the reason being that their buyers are from the Northeast, yes, from some South American countries, but primarily the Northeast, the Midwest, and now California. Now, I will say, and this is something interesting, which is that in this law, there was a carve out for Chinese nationals purchasing through the EB-5 program, which I don't know if our listeners and viewers are familiar, but this is a federal program that allows people who want to get a green card, U.S. green card, to do so if they invest a certain amount of money in a project and create a certain number of jobs for a period of time. And the biggest purchasers of these projects has been Chinese nationals. In fact, a mixed-use project up in Jupiter called Harborside was built with money raised through that. So there is a carve out. So if I'm buying a project that is an EB-5 project in Palm Beach County or wherever, it's or in the state of Florida, it is not affected by this law. So we'll see if it has any effect, and more importantly, we'll see if a judge decides that in fact this law does violate federal fair housing laws.
Interesting. Jean or Mr. Fackler, if you remember back during the Great Recession, U.S. housing market and the condo market in South Florida was really challenged. Basically, a lot of speculation. Anybody could get a mortgage, whether it was a Ninja or anything else. No income, no asset verification types of loans that were out there. If you basically have a heartbeat, you can get a mortgage. And then what happened is the domestic buyer, for the most part, disappeared, in my opinion. And who saved us when we had way too much supply and not enough, people who wanted this stuff? Who saved us? It was the foreign national. We're now at a point where prices are very overvalued. We talked during this podcast about 9 places in the state of Florida where the markets are overvalued. It's a little short-sighted on the state of Florida's part to put in place something that is going to limit investors to be able to come here and save us once again if we do, in fact, experience some kind of downturn? Or is it more important to sort of protect our national security, even though a balloon's able to fly over the continental United States for a number of days? So what say you, Jean, or what say you, Mr. Peckler?
Well, I think it's just a little jingoistic, and it kind of sends a message that perhaps some people are not welcome. And I think that's probably the wrong message to send. I mean, Florida has always been sort of the on the receiving end of investments from rather dubious sources. And what is the percentage? I think a University of Miami professor actually calculated that 40% of the commercial real estate in Miami is directly tied to the drug trade. Is that right? There was some number like that. Peter, you might know more.
I don't know the figure, but I do know one of the experts on money laundering was actually arrested related to conducting money laundering situations on his own. So let's just say back in 2016,
all over again. Okay, yes,
yeah. Back in 2016, FinCEN, Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, with the Treasury Department, they put in place an order that said anybody buying without a mortgage $1 million or more in Miami-Dade County and in Manhattan, ultimately the end user had to be disclosed by the title company and or the law firm, just to give you some hard evidence that in fact the feds they're concerned about the source of this cash. So go ahead, Mr. Cruz.
I think it was just political posturing. I mean, this is just like a political move. It has no significant impact other than to send a message that perhaps Florida may not be as welcoming as it once was, so it does send that message.
Hey, Mr. Fackler,
it's part of to me, it's like a perfect storm, limiting foreign nationals from purchasing real estate. The real estate market's already going to shit. How are you going to add this to it? So to me, it's just a perfect storm of negativity as far as the real estate market down here.
I think it's still unclear though as to how much effect it's really going to have. I mean, first of all, the courts are going to have to work this out. Aside from the law was narrowed to, you have to have some specific tie to the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah.
There was an exception that was created that, okay, you can have one, if you're a Chinese national, you can have one property, just one property. Well,
Yeah.
it's been, while it was initially sounded very broad, it was actually narrowed quite a bit. So I think
Yeah.
it's still unclear as to whether this could really be an impediment to having foreign investors, bail out Florida's real estate economy if that needs to happen at some point, or whether this is, maybe something that's more for show. It's hard to know at this point.
Let's go ahead and go to story number 6. John Fackler, we're going to go to you with story number 6. Coming out of The Real Deal, I'll read you the headline. I'll read you the first couple graphs. Mr. Fackler, during your journalism career, you wrote about white-collar crime. This story sort of smells of something that might be right up your alley. That's kind of why I went to you. So here we go with the headline, first couple, and then the subhead, then the first couple graphs. Headline, financially devastating. Receiver takes over embattled Pembroke Pines condo complex. Anybody who doesn't know where Pembroke Pines is, it's a western suburb of Broward County, which is where Fort Lauderdale is located. So Fort Lauderdale is on the ocean. Pembroke Pines would be to the west of it. Here we go with the subhead. Heron Pond unit owners allege individuals tied to a secretive trust took over the association board and mismanaged the community. Here we go, Mr. Fackler, first couple graphs. A receiver took over an embattled Pembroke Pines condo association that residents allege was long mismanaged by former board members. The Real Deal has learned the lakefront Heron Pond complex, consisting of 19 two-story beige buildings, has been repeatedly slammed by the city over structural integrity issues. Since last summer, Pembroke Pines officials ordered the evacuation of 6 of the buildings and 26 units in 7 other buildings, rendering 122 of the 304 units uninhabitable, according to city records. City inspectors have provided multiple notices about Florida building and fire code violations, but the association has failed to address the issue, records show. In late April, Broward County Chief Judge Jack Tudor Jr. appointed Daniel Sterner, managing director of consulting and financial advisory firm Development Services, and a former mayor of Weston, as the receiver of Heron Pond. And I'll read you one quote from Mr. Sterner, the receiver. The priorities are getting our arms around the property, around the association, understanding its status, and we will report to the court what other initial findings are and take those steps necessary to continue. Mr. Fackler, we're on the cusp of the 2025 Condo Association financial cliff, which is when structural integrity reports have to be done by these older associations. Money has to be earmarked, allocated to actually perform the work. But we're already seeing signs of what is likely to come. So, Mr. Fackler, why don't you give us your first take on it? And then is this a harbinger for what we're going to see come 2025 and beyond?
Well, I believe that's actually what's putting a spotlight on these aging complexes. Essentially, by the way, we're seeing more and more of these stories. We've talked about these stories just about every week, every month. It's a great, great story. It gets very deep into this whole idea of association mismanagement. And really, it's really due to these, tougher codes that are resulting from the Surfside collapse. In this particular complex, it was built as apartments in 1988. Then it was converted to condos in 2006. And, like other aging complexes, it's they're grappling with paying the costly and really legally mandated repairs and also recertifications that are due by this deadline. And it's just putting a spotlight on these people. They're basically scrambling, to try to meet their obligations financially. But really what makes this story stand out is I thought I saw everything, but in this story, apparently the unit owners, and there's about 9 lawsuits against complex, they're claiming that there's a scheme, and South Florida's land of schemes and schemers. They're basically claiming that they're trying to drive down the value of the complex so they can acquire more units at a discounted cost. And I never heard of that before, but it makes sense because it's in such disrepair. Could you imagine there being really a scheme, a conspiracy, literally, to drive down the cost so they can buy another 100 units inside this complex?
So, Mr. Fackler, just to clarify, you're saying some members of the board have quietly created some sort of entity to go and buy units on the cheap.
Yes.
And at the same time, they're not doing what's necessary for the association to make sure that it's maintained to a certain level. And that's why the city's got involved. So this is all coordinated, is what you're saying. The story says.
Well, that's what the allegations are. Nothing's been proven. There's open litigation about this, but it's just kind of shocking that this would go on. I mean, the building itself isn't. There's termite problems. There's cracks in the foundations. I mean, it's literally just falling apart from water seepage and all that. So it's just going from bad to worse. And there's also squatters, and there's been burglaries. One woman, and she's talked about her 2 kids had to move out and rent an apartment because it was unsafe. They had the squatters. They had, so she's paying her mortgage plus she's paying rental until this whole thing, it's a nightmare scenario. So, I don't know what could be done exactly because we talked about, what are the methods that unit owners have to fight? Can they afford legal lawyers? No, they can't. These are middle class people, and they can't afford the cost of litigation. So, what do they do? What can be done? And should a statewide, facility be set up so that people can complain about these issues? And we talked about that several weeks ago, but we're seeing this every week now. There's some other scheme that's arising.
If I can open this up to the floor, Mr. Beckler said this: Florida is a land of schemes and schemers. It's also a land of conspiracy theories. Does the roundtable think that there's any possibility that members of the board could, in fact, be moving against the association, trying to run it into the ground so they can buy it on the cheap and turn around and dump it off to some developer who might want to terminate and turn it into something else? Does that seem possible? Does that seem feasible? What say the roundtable?
Well, I would say, we don't, facts of this particular matter will be borne out in the litigation, hopefully. But I did write some months ago about residents of an older community in West Palm Beach who were dealing with investors who had purchased a number of the units and were renting them out, and had basically turned the lobby and I think the club room into a rental office. They, so there, and monies or expenses were being passed to the condo, all the condo residents, for matters that really had nothing to do with them, but were the business of the rental community. So I think, unfortunately or fortunately, if you're a journalist in Florida, there is a fair amount of schemers, and that's why I love writing about business, because people plus money means something is going to go wrong. In this situation, though, it's terrible for the residents. And, I think John raised a good point about, there being some sort of state facility or something that would be available to help people deal with the effects of these requirements, that these condominiums be adequately maintained and reserved and safeguarded. And that just isn't the case. I mean, I know of several condominium older complexes in Palm Beach County that are struggling with this right now. People are trying to dump their units. I'm sure you've talked about this in the past. It's a really tough time. Unless you can afford to buy new, it's kind of dicey to be a condo owner right now in Florida.
Mr. Gruss, if you could round this up for us.
Well, we're finally shining the light on corrupt organizations that are HOAs. I mean, that have been run like personal fiefdoms of corrupt residents who have somehow managed to get themselves elected to these HOA boards and have delayed all that have basically abdicated their responsibilities. And every week, I mean, you have asked John Fackler to comment on one HOA or another that has absconded with funds, that has acted criminally, and now this law is helping to shine the light on these incredibly corrupt organizations. And I am not surprised that groups of them are getting together to try to lowball other residents out of buildings. I mean, that's happening in Miami. I personally know of one building where the president of the HOA has been going around to some of the residents, many of whom don't live here. They rent the place out. They're foreign nationals. They have no idea what their place is worth. And they're trying to lowball offers to them and then turning around and selling it to a developer who's set up an anonymous sort of a shell company. And that's going to eventually take over the condo and terminate it. So, I mean, and they're pocketing the money, and these condo associations, the folks who are elected to these condo boards are corrupt, and they're taking money. Now, I don't know any of the details of the specific case right here. I have no idea what it's about or whether the allegations are true or not. I just know that these HOAs have gone a really long time without any light being shown on them, and we don't know what they've been up to. And now that we've discovered that so many of them have zero in reserve, that basically they've absconded with the money. They've done some. Where's the money gone? We're going to have a lot of these stories popping up, as we have already, but I think we're going to get many more of them.
And I think that is the best way to wrap up the podcast this week. So I want to thank the roundtable for participating. Let me thank Jean Gruss. He was a journalist for over 25 years, including a gig at the Tampa Tribune. Now, right now, he has his own public relations marketing firm called Gruss Communications. Check out his website, GrussPR.com, GrussPR.com, GRUSSPR.com. Get him on X, which is formerly Twitter. Get him at Jean Gruss, JeanGruss. I want to thank John Fackler. He was a journalist for 20 years, worried about white-collar crimes, working over the South Florida Business Journal. Now he does public relations and marketing. You can get him on X, which is formerly Twitter. Get him at JT Fackler, JTFAKLER. And I want to thank Alexandra Clough from the Palm Beach Post. Thank you for making your maiden voyage with us. Hopefully it was enjoyable. If anyone wants to get a hold of you, they can get you on X, which is formerly Twitter. Get you at Clough PVP, which is ACLOUGH PVP, which stands for Palm Beach Post. And I'm Peter Zalewski of Condo Vultures. If you have any comments for us, if you have any questions, get us on X, which is formerly Twitter. Get us at Miami RRP, which stands for Miami Reporters Roundtable Podcast. Not AARP, but Miami RRP. And don't forget to check out my website, condovultures.com, if you're looking for anything related to condo information in the Tri-County, South Florida area. So until next time, hope everybody takes care of themselves. We'll catch up soon. Ciao, ciao.
It's a simple formula, and it works. Buy low, sell high. We're Condo Vultures, and when it comes to your real estate, we help you buy low. At Condo Vultures, we represent the buyer, and now's the time to buy. Log on to condovultures.com for more information. condovultures.com. And remember, before you sell high, you have to buy low. Featured in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, 60 Minutes, and Time Magazine. Condo Vultures Realty, a licensed Florida real estate brokerage capitalizing on the condo correction since 2006.
Don't buy a South Florida condo, discounted or distressed, before taking a Condo Vultures correction tour. CondoVultures.com offers weekly bus and walking tours that focus on educating buyers on the how-tos of identifying discounted condos, analyzing the opportunities, and purchasing units. Every tour attendee receives a list of all condo projects in a particular market, a market assessment handout, and unmatched expert analysis. For more information on the condo correction tours, please visit condovultures.eventbrite.com.